No, I understand why you did that. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmain. So as always, we thank you for coming. We understand that there's a lot of things you could do with your Monday evening. And we always appreciate your presence here in the masjid with us to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to remind ourselves of our duty to Him and to cooperate in helping each other to fulfill that duty. We have now reached chapter number 3 from Kitab at-Tawhid, and that is the chapter which the author has entitled Babu ma ja'a anna man haqqaqa at-Tawhid dakhal al-jannata بغير حساب ولا عذاب. He said the chapter, the one who حقق التوحيد will enter paradise without reckoning or punishment. طيب, the word or the phrase or the expression حقق التوحيد, it literally means, when we say حقق الشيء, it literally means he achieved it, he realized it, he embodied it, and he fulfilled its conditions, its requirements. So when he says حقق التوحيد, he achieved the tawheed, he realized the tawheed, he embodied the tawheed, he fulfilled the conditions of a tawheed, and the primary condition of a tawheed is تخليصه, is to purify it from ash-shawa'id or shirk, from everything which is contradictory to it, and particularly shirk, idolatry, every form of idolatry, every aspect of polytheism. And that's why the translators, when they translated the word haqqaqa, they translated it as purifies, even though that's not a literal translation, but rather it is the implication of the meaning of a tahqiq, because as it relates to a tawheed, if you achieve it, if you realize it, if you embody it, that means you have what? Purified it primarily from a shirk. Now, the achieving of a tawheed or realizing it, tahqiq at-tawheed, it's on different levels. It's not just if you make a tahqiq, everybody who achieves a tahqiq or tahqiq at-tawheed is going to be on the same level. And to facilitate and to make this, what I intend to say, accessible, I'm going to give you an example before I clarify. Let's say that we have 3 people, 3 individuals, all of them, they stand up to offer prayer. So one of them, he offers prayer and he recites Al-Fatiha. That's it. He recites Al-Fatiha, and after reciting Al-Fatiha, he bows. And when he recites Al-Fatiha, he recites it without at-Tajweed. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin. No Tajweed. Completes Al-Fatiha in this way, and he bows. Has he fulfilled the requirements of the prayer? Yes. What's absolutely required, the bare minimum requirement when a person is offering prayer, is that they recite Al-Fatiha. Anything beyond that is what we call mustahab. It is recommended. It will make the prayer more complete, but it's not a requirement for the acceptance of the prayer, for the validity of the prayer. Suppose another person came and he offered his prayer similarly. But he prayed Al-Fatiha and a short surah without a tajweed. Okay? So this person, has he also fulfilled the requirements of the prayer? Yes. And he went a little further in the fulfillment of those requirements than the previous person. Is that not so? Fine. Third person comes and he offers his prayer reciting Al-Fatiha and the short surah with a tajweed. Okay? Fulfilled what? The requirements of the prayer, and went a step even further. So basically, similarly, when it comes to the people who yuhaqqiqun at-Tawheed, the people who they achieve, they realize, they embody at-Tawhid and fulfill its conditions, they're on different levels. The first level is what we call a tahqiq al-wajib. The person who fulfills at-Tawhid, meaning he fulfills the basic requirement, which means he does everything that he's required to do and avoids everything he's prohibited from doing. You guys see that? That's the bare minimum of what we call tahqiq at-Tawhid, fulfilling at-Tawhid. The second level, which is the higher level, is achieving at-Tawhid in the sense, or tahqiq al-mustahab, which means he does everything that's required and adds to that which is recommended but not required. He avoids everything which is prohibited and adds to that avoiding those things which are discouraged but not prohibited. You guys see that? So he goes what? A step further, just like the example of the person who offered the prayer. He went what? A step forward. He went above and beyond what was required. So the Imam is saying that the people who go above and beyond in their achievement of at-Tawhid, doing what's required and adding to it what's recommended, avoiding what is prohibited and adding to that, avoiding what is even discouraged, but not absolutely prohibited, دَخَلُوا الْجَنَّةَ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ وَلَا عَذَابٍ. Those people, they will enter paradise without punishment and without even being reckoned. And so this chapter, just like the previous chapter, shows you the excellence and the thoughtfulness from the Imam in ordering his book. He starts out with a chapter, basically we said it could be entitled Babu Wujub at-Tawhid al-Ayan. The chapter indicating that at-Tawhid is required upon every individual, whether man or jinn. Then he comes and says, because people may do it just because they have to do it. So he brings a chapter and says, Babu Fadl at-Tawhid wa ma yukaffir min al-dhunub. He brings a chapter that says the virtue of at-Tawhid, what we stand to gain if we practice at-Tawhid, why we should want to do it happily, willingly, full of excitement and keenly because of what we stand to gain from it in terms of the reward from Allah and in terms of the forgiveness of our sins. Then he comes and adds a third chapter and says, this is the chapter about that special group of people who, when it comes to at-Tawhid, they go above and beyond. They do far more than what they're required. And as a consequence, they get a reward on top of the reward of those people who just do it happily. And that is that they will enter paradise without punishment or reckoning. Allahu Akbar. Which one of us wants to meet Allah naked and uncircumcised and be questioned about what we did? Nobody wants to be questioned. So the Prophet is saying, here's your opportunity, ya muwahid, O monotheist, O believer. Do this and you will meet Allah and you will not be punished, nor will you be reckoned. طيب. So what's the overview of the chapter? What does the Imam talk about in this chapter? Basically three things. The first thing he does is he gives us an ayah, a text from the Quran that provides a practical example of the one who actualized at-Tawhid, so that we can follow in his footsteps. Like, this is your role model, do as he did. And you'll be min muhaqqiqi at-Tawhid. You'll be from the people who achieve, who embody, who realize at-Tawhid. Give you a practical example, because if you have a practical example to follow, it makes it easier for you to what? Achieve your objective. You don't have to suss it out, you don't have to figure it out for yourself, you just what? Follow this person's footsteps. The second thing the Imam does is he cites another text from the Quran, another ayah, which provides the primary condition for tahqiq at-Tawhid. What's the basic thing that we have to do to be min muhaqqiqi at-Tawhid, the people who embody at-Tawhid and achieve it? What is that box that we have to check? We need to know that. And so he gives us an ayah, gives us a proof that tells us what that is, so that we can achieve the reward associated with tahqiq at-Tawhid. And then last but not least, he cites an athar and a hadith. An athar which includes a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that athar details qualities, the qualities that qualify the person who possesses them to be from the achievers, the embodiers of at-Tawhid, muhaqqiqi at-Tawhid. And if we exemplify these qualities, we can consider ourselves what? from them, inshallah ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us all from them. Ameen. So the first thing he starts out with is that practical example. That's the ayah from Surah An-Nahl, the 16th chapter, verse number 120, in which he says, Inna Ibrahima kana ummatan qanitan lillahi hanifan walam yaku min mushrikeen. So how many qualities did he mention? Let me give the ayah in English. He says, verily Abraham was indeed a model, devoutly obedient to Allah, unswervingly true in faith, and he was not of those who ascribe partners to Allah. So basically this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentions that role model. Who's that role model? Ibrahim alayhi salam. And he mentions 4 qualities that he had that made him from muhaqqiqiyya tawheed, made him from the people who have achieved and embodied the tawheed. What are those 4 qualities? So, first of all, it says with a model. We're going to talk about what that means. Ummah. Devoutly obedient, qanitan. Number 3? Huh? Ahsan, doesn't ascribe partners, which is the last one. وَلَمْ يَكُمْ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. And before that he said hanifan, which basically means, we're going to talk about what it means, but those are the 4 qualities. Ummah, qanitan, hanifan, وَلَمْ يَكُمْ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. What does that mean? Ummah. The word ummah here, it means imamun wa qudwatun fil khayr. It means he was a role model and an excellent example of goodness for others. A role model and an excellent example of goodness for others. Imamun wa qudwatun fil khayr. The second one, qanitan. Devoted or devout. That's what it means. Qanitan, devoted or devout. And basically what that means, one who constantly obeys Allah. Constantly obeys Allah. The third quality, hanifan. Hanif, it basically means al-muqbil al-tawhid, the one who actively pursues a tawhid. That his pursuit of tawhid wasn't passive. It was what? It was active. He actively pursued monotheism. And that necessitates, if you actively turn toward monotheism with all of your heart and all of your attention and focus and energy and efforts, that necessitates turning what? Away? Away from a shirk. And that's the meaning of hanif. The one who actively pursues a tawheed and avoids a shirk. طيب, number 4, وَلَمْ يَكُمْ الْمُشْرِكِينَ, which is the 4th quality and perhaps the most important quality that Ibrahim exhibited that made him from muhaqqiqiyya tawheed. And the role model, not just any muhaqqiq tawheed, not just any achiever of a tawheed, but the role model for the achievers of tawheed, is that he was not from the polytheists. And that means 2 things. 1, he himself did not commit a shirk. La kathirihi wa la qalili. He didn't commit a lot of it, he didn't commit a little of it, not even a trivial amount of it. None of it. He totally avoided it. But he also did not associate with the people of a shirk. And you're going to see this later on in the book, that it's not enough that we just avoid a shirk, but we avoid the people of a shirk. That we're so offended by the associating of partners with Allah that we don't willfully, if we have a choice, associate with the people, mix with the people who commit a shirk. That is the greatest offense to us. We are offended on behalf of our Lord by the people who associate partners with Him, Jalla Jalaluhu wa Aduma Sultanu. So in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is basically saying, O believer, exert yourself and make every effort to embody these qualities. Ummah. Be an example to others in goodness. Qanitan, devoutly obedient. Hanifan, muqbil al-tawheed. Wa mu'rid an al-shirk. A person who gives all of his attention, turns himself entirely to a tawheed, and turns his back on a shirk. Wa lam yaku min al-mushrikeen, and is not from the people who associate partners with Allah, and does not freely and willfully associate with the people who associate partners with Allah. In other words, Allah is telling us Ibrahim, O believer, is the gold standard. If you're looking for an example to follow, someone to be like, to pattern yourself after, especially as it relates to a tawheed, Ibrahim is your man. That's basically what the ayah is saying. The gold standard of a Tawhid, or being a embodier of a Tawhid. Then we come to the next ayah, or the next nas, or the next proof text that the author gives, which is an ayah from Surah Al-Mu'minun, the 23rd chapter, verse number 59, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِرَبِّهِمْ وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ بِرَبِّهِمْ لَا يُشْرِكُونَ. And those who ascribe not anyone as partners with their Lord. They do not associate anyone as partners with their Lord. طيب. So here what the author does is he provides for us, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this context is describing those believers, those special beloved believers. And he mentions one of their qualities is وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ بِرَبِّهِمْ لَا يُشْرِكُونَ, those who do not associate partners with their Lord. So basically that's telling us that the primary requirement to be from those who have achieved, who have realized, who have actualized, who have embodied at-Tawhid, muhaqqiqi at-Tawhid, is to avoid a shirk. The primary thing we have to do is avoid a shirk in all its forms and in all of its degrees. Now I want to ask you something. Suppose somebody said, there's an animal called Bobo. It's a ferocious animal. It's just recently been discovered. Ferocious. It's probably more of a predator, more vicious than a lion or a tiger. Newly discovered. I want you to avoid it. At all costs, don't confront this Bobo. It will kill you in an instant. What would you say? What would you say in response to that?
You got it.
Huh?
You got it.
Okay. Where is it? He says, it has been sighted in your neighborhood. It has been sighted in your neighborhood. What would you say now?
Who's cited?
Huh?
Who's cited?
Who's sighted? Okay, they show you some videos where people what? They say, hey, I sighted it. I saw it last night. It was digging in my garbage. And I took some pictures of it, but they didn't come out well. Now what are you going to say? People have seen it. And these are people you know in your neighborhood. They're credible people. They're not liars.
Who said he can attack you?
Huh?
Who said he attacks you?
It attacked somebody and it killed them. And they have they have footage of it and, everything. And these are credible people. What are you going to say?
Then yeah, I'll be careful.
You want to avoid it. Okay, you want to avoid Bobo and you realize, you believe, yes, there's a such thing as a Bobo. It's out here in my neighborhood. I want to avoid it. Now what are you going to say? Okay, you're going to kill it, but how are you going to kill it? Tell me how. At some point, you need to know what it looks like, right? Is that not so? Because how am I going to know to avoid it if I don't know what it looks like? I don't know its reality. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us here that one of the qualities, or the quality, the primary, most important quality of muhaqqiqi at-Tawhid is that they avoid a shirk. How can you avoid a shirk if you don't know? If you don't know what it is. You guys see that? And what this teaches us is the importance of learning at-Tawhid and learning its opposite, a shirk. These types of classes, this class that we're doing, is essential knowledge for the Muslim. When the Prophet said in the Hadith of Anas, collected by Ibn Majah, he said, طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ فَرِيضَةٌ عَلَى كُلِّ Muslim. He said, seeking knowledge is obligatory upon every Muslim. This knowledge of a Tawheed is included, it's intended by that statement. It's essential knowledge. Every Muslim has to know a Tawheed and know its opposite, a shirk, so they can avoid it. Why? Because that's the single most important job of the believer. To worship Allah and to avoid worshipping the false gods. وَلَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولًا أَنْ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَاجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتَ. We have sent in every religious community a prophet proclaiming, worship Allah alone and shun the false gods. This was their message, primarily at its core. All the prophets came with this. So every believer is required essential knowledge to know what is a shirk so they can do that. What is a Tawheed so they can do that. And what is a shirk so they can avoid it. So when we have these types of classes and people don't attend, but not only do they not attend, but they don't attend and they have errors in their Tawheed. if you sit and you talk to them and they say, hey man, pray for me, man. I went and took this job interview and it's a great job. It's my dream job. The salary's perfect. The benefits are perfect. Pray for me, akhi. You say, hey, tell me more about it. Why do you think you're going to get it? Oh no, I don't want to jinx it. I don't want to talk about it too much because I don't want to jinx it. People are saying this. People in casual conversation believe in things like jinxes. They believe in lucky charms. They believe that there are things that can affect the outcome positively or negatively besides Allah. That's what a shirk. And they don't realize that they're committing a shirk by saying that. That's a type of shirk. But those same people they don't come and learn. When you say there's a class of Tawhid, they say, come on, I know that. I know that already. But don't jinx my job. I know a Tawhid, but don't jinx me. So again, when we see the poor attendance and we see at the same time errors in the Tawhid, it demonstrates a level of ignorance that classes like this could do what? Could eradicate. If we just took the time, 30 minutes, 40 minutes on a Monday evening, just to learn about who Allah is, why we should worship Him, and how do we worship Him correctly, and avoid undermining that worship by associating partners. That's one thing. The second thing, it doesn't speak well of our own what? Self-awareness. Person says, I know a Tawhid. And then he says, don't jinx my job. And he says, hey man, I'm sorry, I dropped that. Can you pick up my rabbit's foot? They believe in these things. But they're saying, I know a Tawhid. It shows a lack of self-awareness. It also highlights the success that the shaitan is having in the ummah. Turning us away from a Tawhid, which is the first step toward turning us toward what? A shirk. Which is the thing that will destroy our deen, as Allah says, Inna Allah la yaghfir and yushraka bih. Allah does not forgive the sin of a shirk. And this is what the shaitan wants. And he starts out by telling us, oh, you're good. You're a muwahid. Why do you need to bother with that? You guys see that? طيب, ثم بعد ذلك, the Imam al-Mujaddid, rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions this incredible athar / hadith on the authority of Hussein ibn Abdul Rahman. And what we'll do is we'll read the athar, and then we'll circle back and just comment on a few important points about, just to explain some of the beautiful meanings of the athar. And then we'll go through the masail, which will explain what the Imam intended by the chapter itself. So, Hussein ibn Abdul Rahman, he says, once when I was with Sa'ad bin Jubair, he asked, who among you saw the shooting star last night? I answered, I saw it. And if I see that the translation is poor, I'm just going to change it. So if you look and you say, that's not what mine says, it's because I don't like the way that some of the translations that they did and some of the tenses of the verbs, etc. I then explained, I was not in prayer at the time. I was not offering prayer at the time. What did you do then? Or what were you doing? He said, I had been stung by a poisonous scorpion. He said, what did you do? If you were stung, what did you do? He said, istarqait. He said, I used ruqya. We're going to talk about what that means. I used ruqya to cure it. He said, what compelled you to do that? Ma hamalak ala dhalik. He said, a hadith I heard from a Sha'bi. He asked, what hadith did you hear from a Sha'bi? What did he tell you? I replied, he reported from Buraidah ibn al-Husayb, who said that ruqya is not allowed, and actually, that's not, you could interpret the hadith that way, but that's not what the hadith, you look at the sharh of the hadith, that's not what the hadith actually means. The hadith is, la ruqyata illa min aynin aw huma. So you could translate that literally as, there's no ruqya allowed, except in the case of an ayn, a person gets the evil eye, somebody puts the evil eye on them, or they get stung, a poisonous sting. But the actual meaning of the hadith, according to the scholars like Al-Khattabi, is la ruqyata anfa' wa awla min illa min al-ayn, or anfa' min al-ayn wal-huma. That there's no ruqya which is more useful and has greater utility than the one that is used in the case of the evil eye or al-huma. Because why? It's permitted, as we're going to see, to make ruqya in other situations. So anyway, that's what it means, not what they translated it as. And then it says, he, Sa'id ibn Jubair said, he has done well who stopped or sufficed himself with what he heard. Meaning he followed the lead that he knew. But it's as if Sa'id is saying that is to say, yeah, now I understand why you did what you did, but I don't agree with what you did. And I'm going to tell you why. He says, however, Ibn Abbas narrated to us that the Prophet ﷺ, he said, all the nations were made to pass before me. Uridat alayya al-umam. I was made to see all of the religious communities paraded before me. And I saw a prophet with a small group of followers with him, a band, somewhere between 7 and 10. وَرَأَيْتُ النَّبِيِّ, and I saw a prophet with 2 or 3 people, 2 or 3 followers. And I saw a prophet, وَلَيْسَ مَعْهُ أَحَدٍ, and he had no followers whatsoever. He was standing there all alone. No one in this dunya responded to his call. Then there appeared a large group, a massive group of people, and I thought that they might be my nation. But I was told that they were the nation of Moses and his people. Later, a larger group appeared on the horizon, and I was told that those were my people, and among them were 70,000 who would enter paradise without reckoning or punishment. And that's the shahid of the hadith. Then the Prophet ﷺ, he got up and went into his house. فَخَاضَ النَّاسُ فِي أُولَٰئِكَ, and the people went into discussion as to who they might be. The people started saying to themselves, 70,000 people. Who might they be? Who are these people who are going to enter paradise without reckoning or punishment? So some of them said, perhaps they are the companions of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Others said, maybe they are those who were born into Islam and therefore they never ascribe partners with Allah. Why? Because many of the Prophet's companions, the older ones, the elder ones, lived before Islam and practiced shirk. So they were saying maybe they're the ones who they were born after the advent of Islam, and so they don't have any knowledge of associating partners with Allah. They don't have that mark on their record, right? So then, while they were exchanging their views, because they went on to say some other things, the Prophet came out and was informed about the news, what they were saying. He asked them, okay, what are you guys discussing? They said, we're trying to figure out who these people are. So the Prophet, he said, they are those people who do not treat themselves with a ruqya, nor do they believe in bad or good omens, nor do they get themselves branded, cauterized. Branded is not a good way to translate that, but we're going to talk about what cauterization means, inshallah. But they put their trust only in their Lord. On that, Ukasha, and you can also say Ukasha, Ibn Mihsan, he got up and he said, Ya Rasulullah, ij'alni minhum. He said, Ud'u Allah and yaj'alni minhum. He said, ask Allah, pray to Allah, that I will be one of them. So the Prophet said, Anta minhum, you're from them. And then another man stood up and said, Ud'u Allah and yaj'alni minhum. Pray to Allah that He makes me from them. And the Prophet said, Sabaqaka biha Ukasha. He said, Ukasha has preceded you. Basically, sit down. طيب. All right, let's look at the athar more closely and talk about some of the points from it that need some clarity. And then we'll do the masail. So, Sa'id ibn Jubair, he asked Hussein ibn Abdul Rahman and some of the people who were there in their gathering, he asked them, did they see the shooting star the previous night? So Hussein, he responded, قُلْتُ أَنَا. He said, I saw it. ثُمَّ قُلْتُ أَمَّا إِنِّي لَمْ أَكُنْ فِي صَلَاةٍ وَلَكِنِّي دُدِغْتُ. He said, but I wasn't praying at the time, but rather I had been stung by a scorpion. Now the benefit that the scholars have mentioned from this part, this line, is that If Hussein ibn Abdurrahman had said, I saw it, and didn't say anything else, it would have been assumed because of the nature of the people at that time. They were people given to prayer, given to night prayer, to the point that one of them might go and knock the door of his friend or companion at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning, expecting him to be what? Awake, because it was so common for people to be awake at night in prayer. So when he said, I saw it last night, it would have been assumed by everybody that he was praying the night prayer. But he wasn't. And he didn't want to take credit for something that he hadn't been doing. Look at the piety, look at the sincerity. Because most of us, many of us nowadays, most of us not fair, but many of us nowadays will take credit for something that we really don't deserve credit for, if the credit is there to be had. We'll come, for example, at Maghrib on a Monday, and somebody says, Afarta? Have you broke your fast? Here, take some dates. And we won't say, no, I wasn't fasting. We'll take the dates and let him believe that we have been fasting. You guys see that? But these early Muslims were so pious and so sincere. They didn't want to be praised for anything they hadn't done. So he said, but I want you to know, I did see it, but I wasn't praying. وَلَكِنِّي لُدِغْتُ. I don't want to be praised for something I wasn't doing. So when he said that, I was stung by a scorpion. Sa'id ibn Jubair asked him, فَمَاذَا صَنَعْتَ? فَمَاذَا صَنَعْتَ? He said, so what did you do? You got stung? What did you do? You were up. You got stung. What did you do? He said, istarqayt. He said, I did ruqyah. I made a special prayer for healing using formulas from the Quran or the Hadith. I used a prayer that is considered something which can be used to heal what? Heal things like this. And so that's what I did. So he said, وَمَا حَمَلَكَ عَلَى ذَلِكَ. And he said, and what prompted you to do that? As if, mustankir, like as if to say, I don't think you should have done that. Why did you do that? And what that shows you is that the early Muslims were the people who always sought a religious justification for everything they did that was religious. If you're going to make ruqyah, which is a religious thing, and you're going to make it for something, then you should have some basis for that, some evidence for that. You have to have proof for everything you do with a religious basis or with a religious intent. As Allah says in Surah Al-Baqarah, I believe it's the 111th chapter, the 111th ayah of the second chapter, 111, He says, قُلْ هَاتُوا بُرْهَانَكُمْ إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. He says, produce your proof if you're truthful. In the deen of Allah, you have to have proof for everything. And the Prophet said in the Hadith of Aisha, he said, مَنْ عَمِلَ عَمَلًا لَيْسَ عَلَيْهِ أَمْرُنَا فَهُوَ رَدٌّ. Whoever does a deed in this religion, which we have not prescribed, they don't have any evidence for that, it will be rejected. So we have to have proof for everything. So he said, مَا حَمَلَكَ عَلَى ذَلِكَ. You should have some proof for that. So he said, حَدِيثٌ حَدَّثَنَاهُ الشَّعْبِي. He said it was a hadith that a Sha'bi shared with us. A Sha'bi, he told us this hadith, and based on that hadith, that hadith is my proof that we can do this, and we should do this. He said, well, what was that hadith? He said that he told us, لا رقية إلا من عين أو حمى. There is no ruqyah except from the evil eye or a poisonous sting. Meaning, as we said, there's no ruqyah more beneficial, more worthwhile, which with greater utility than the one which is done because of the evil eye or a poisonous sting. So this doesn't mean, or the hadith is not saying, that these are the only circumstances in which ruqyah is acceptable or permitted. And we know this because the Prophet ﷺ, he gave ruqyah to other people for other circumstances. We also know that he himself was in the practice that every night he would make ruqyah for himself. We have the famous hadith of Isha, where the Prophet at night, when he, as part of his regimen, his routine before sleeping, he would cup his hands and he would recite قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ and Mu'awwidhatayn, the last two chapters of the Quran. And he would blow into his hands and rub them all over his body as far as his hands could touch. And he did this what? Every night. This is ruqyah. And so this shows you that when the Prophet said, "La ruqyata illa min ayn aw huma," there's no ruqya except from this and this, he meant there's what? These are the best cases or situations or scenarios to do ruqya, but they're not the only ones in which ruqya is accepted. But ثم بعد ذلك, he said, Sa'id ibn Jubair, he said, قَدْ أَحْسَنَ مَنْ انْتَهَى إِلَى مَا سَمِعَ. He said, he has done well who acted in accordance with the knowledge that has reached him. وَلَكِنْ حَدَّثَنَا Ibn Abbas. He said, but Ibn Abbas told us this, which I'm going to share with you. So that teaches us a few things. One, it's as if Sa'id ibn Jubair does not agree with what Hussein ibn Abdurrahman did. And he's basically responding to him, basically saying that I have something with me that shows that what you did was not the proper thing to do or was not the best course. Maybe it's okay to do that, but if you didn't do it, it would be better. If you didn't do a ruqya, it would be better. At the same time, you notice that he praises Hussein. He praises him for following the evidence that supports the action that he took and the stance that he took. Even though Sa'id ibn Jubair himself, he doesn't agree with it. He says, I respect you for following the evidence that you have, even though I don't agree with it. You guys see that? That tells us something about the early Muslims that many of us in modern times have to develop. One, it shows how keenly and attentively the early Muslims sought to follow the evidence. How keenly and attentively they sought to what? To follow the evidence. Everything I do, I try to have proof for what I do. And how they strictly avoided believing, saying, or doing anything religiously without evidence to support those beliefs, those statements, those actions. It also shows us that religion must be supported by knowledge. And we have to avoid basing our religion entirely on the madhab, or the society, or heredity, or tradition, what was passed down to us and what our fathers, people say, you'll say, well, why do you pray like that? Person says, well, that's how everybody prays where I'm from, or that's how my father taught me to pray. Okay, that's fine, but we need to know that that prayer is the prayer that Allah wants us to pray, the prayer that He's going to accept. We have to base it on knowledge. It also shows us something which, this is the main thing I wanted to hit on, that we're lacking nowadays, and that is that the early Muslims, in matters of legitimate difference of opinion, were more concerned with the process than they were with the result of the conclusion. So basically, two people can disagree about something. And the early Muslims were like this. Two Imams, two scholars, two very knowledgeable people will look at the evidence and draw very different conclusions. When they debate, they're more concerned about, okay, well, how did you reach that conclusion? Person explains how they reached it. This person will say, you know, I can see that thought process. I see where you're coming from. I don't agree with it, but I respect it. We're different. If somebody does something different than we do, and we realize that the difference of opinion is legitimate, it's valid, there's evidence to support what they're saying. We don't agree with what they extracted from the evidence, but we see that there's evidence. Many of us are very intolerant. It's my way or else. You have to do it this way. My way or the highway. My way or nothing. No, that's not the way the early Muslims were with these type of masail, these types of issues. And you have, for example, and this is one example out of many that we could cite, and that's the statement of a Shafi'i, very famous statement where he said, he would say, قولي صواب يحتمل الخطأ وقول خصمي خطأ يحتمل الصواب. He used to say, my opinion is correct, but it could be wrong. And the opinion of my opponent is wrong, but it could be correct. Right? Tolerance. That in these masail, I do my research and I'm confident that the conclusion I've reached is the correct one. But I can see that my opponent has a point. And there may be something I missed. I may be looking at it wrong and he may be right. You see that? We have to learn how to do this in these types of masail. Yeah, are there some masail, some issues where we can't do that? It's black and white. It's right and wrong. Yeah, there's some Messiah like that. But not all of the Messiah like that. And when we make all of the Messiah like that, it drives a wedge between us that shouldn't be there. The believers are supposed to be as much as they can to minimize their differences and to be one ummah on one accord. But from the Prophet, he says, "Uridat alayya al-umam." The nations were paraded before me. And what the Prophet means here, they were paraded before him in a dream. He saw this in a dream. It was not during an Isra wal Mi'raj, and it was not during an awakened state. But he saw this in a dream. But the dreams of the prophets are a type of wahy, right? They're a type of revelation. But from ba'dalik, he mentions that he saw a prophet. رَأَيْتُ النَّبِي مَاهُ الرَّهَطِ. I saw a prophet with a small band of followers. 5, 6, 7, less than 10. وَرَأَيْتُ النَّبِي وَمَاهُ الرَّجُلُ وَالرَّجُلَانِ. I saw a prophet with only 1 or 2 followers. وَرَأَيْتُ النَّبِي وَلَيْسَ مَعَهُ أَحَدٌ. I saw a prophet without a single follower. There's a lot that can be said as it relates to this part of the Athar / Hadith. And I'll try to mention some of those points ala ujala. So one is that it teaches us that we should not be fooled by large numbers and the abundance of followers. And that we should never make that a yardstick for truth and falsehood. And we're seeing nowadays with the emergence of social media, and social media being a means for da'wah, a means for evangelism and ministry. We're seeing that there are certain people who, they're very charismatic, they're very well spoken, they are highly credentialed. And they are able, through these means, to garner a large following on these social media platforms. A person may have hundreds of thousands, even maybe 1 million followers on Facebook, on Twitter, on whatever. And people will say this is an indication or a sign that he's on the truth. Contrast that with someone who does not have even a fraction of that presence on social media, that following on these platforms. And people will say this is an indication that he's a person of falsehood and that there's no value in his scholarship. But if that were the case, then every prophet would have had what? Lots of followers. You guys see that? That a person himself may be good, as these prophets were certainly good, because Allah only chose the best of the best to be his prophets and messengers. But they weren't followed. Not because there was a fault in them, but in many cases, or most cases, because there was a fault in the people to whom they were sent. But it also teaches us that we, when we work for the sake of Allah, we shouldn't work to garner a large following, such that we make compromises in order to what? To gather the greatest number of people. That basically will compromise so that more people will listen to us, will accept our message. And we fear that if we say, this is haram, or this is shirk, these people will run away from us. So we don't say those things. It's the message here, the underlying message is we shouldn't do that. We don't compromise. One of the reasons why these prophets didn't have any followers is because they spoke the truth, the unadulterated truth to the people. And many people in their cases didn't like that. Most people didn't like it and didn't accept it. And so therefore the true measure of correctness and truth is following the truth and promoting the truth and calling to the truth, and not the number of followers. We cannot make a connection, a one-to-one connection between the number of followers that a person has. In fact, you will not find in the Quran one instance where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised al-kathra. You will not find one instance where Allah praised abundance, the masses, the majority, having large numbers of followers. You won't find it. In fact, you'll find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blamed that and said that most of the people, what? They do the wrong thing. They do the bad thing. They don't follow the truth. For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِن تُطِعْ أَكْثَرَ مَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ يُضِلُّوكَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. If you obey most of the people, they will guide you away from the straight path. He says, وَقَلِيلٌ مِنْ عِبَادِي الشُّكُورِ. Very few of my servants are thankful. He says, وَكَثِيرٌ مِنْهُمْ فَاسِقُونَ. And a large number of them a great majority of them are wicked. He says, وَلَكِنْ أَكْثَرُ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. But most people don't know, right? And he says, وَلَكِنْ أَكْثَرُهُمْ يَجْهَلُونَ. And most of them are ignorant. You see, in every instance that Allah mentioned al-kathra, mentioned large numbers, He mentioned something blameworthy, something for which they should be blamed and not praised. It's not a sign that a person is on goodness. If there are a large number of people around them, if we were to say that, what's the largest religious faith group in the world? Christianity. So does that make Islam wrong?
No.
Because we're not the majority. You guys see that? This logic, it doesn't make sense. Also, if you look at the hadith collected by Muslim, I think it's Muslim, Untitled Chapter, the Prophet mentioned that the believers, vis-a-vis the non-believers, throughout the centuries, are like one white hair on the back of a black bull. One white hair on the back of how many strands of hair do you think are on a bull?
Millions.
Millions. He said that the true believers are like what? One white hair on all of that. Kathra, the large numbers, is not a proof of anything. I wanted to say, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I just want to say one other thing. Is that one of the things that you benefit from this part of the hadith is that the prophets, they were extremely strong-willed. And they were extremely strong-minded. They were not weak people. Because you have to be strong to call to Allah for years. And some of you got to figure the earlier prophets, they lived a lot longer than we did. Nuh, he called to Allah for 950 years. That doesn't mean he lived for he might have lived for thousands of years. But he called to Allah for 950 years. Imagine calling to Allah for 950 years and nobody follows you. What would that do to the average person's spirit? I'm going to tell you what it does. Because I know people who gave their life to da'wah, went overseas and spent 6 years or 7 years or 10 years or 15 years studying either in a traditional fashion, under the foot of a sheikh in some poor dusty masjid with a dirt floor, memorize Quran, memorize Sahih Bukhari, memorize Sahih Muslim, whatever it was. Learned the Arabic language because they were non-Arabs. Did all this studying. Came back to America and got kicked around from masjid to masjid. No respect for their knowledge, their scholarship, to the point that this particular person, he ended up, because he couldn't support his family, ended up being a diesel mechanic. Know another brother, very knowledgeable, especially in the Arabic language, spent time overseas studying. Again, same thing. You spend days and nights preparing lectures to come to the masjid to lecture to one person or two people. Pretty soon people say, look, you're not commercial enough. You don't have the pizzazz. You don't have the charisma. We need somebody else. Person gets tired of that to the point that he became a dentist. And other people have left da'wah after studying all this knowledge and being able to deliver it. And not just being able to deliver knowledge, but maybe also having a very multifaceted skill set. Able to do other things. Whatever they're asked to do. If it's administrative, they can do it. If it's youth-oriented, they can do it. If it's outreach-oriented, they can do it. But for whatever reason, you're not a fit. People just stop giving da'wah to the point, not only do they stop giving da'wah and go off and do these other jobs, these secular jobs, if you will, but they even, when they're asked, hey, just come to the masjid, give a class once a week or something like that, they become triggered. They're averse to the idea of teaching Islam and making what they call zakat al-ilm, giving the zakat of the knowledge that they've learned because of what they've been through. This is what happens to the average person, and I've seen it happen. And we have to, as community members, as laymen, we have to understand the role that we play in that. The role we play in depriving ourselves of people who will teach us because of our indifference. Because we can't sit for 5 or 7 minutes for a khatira after Salat al-Isha. where a person will just say, Allah said and His Messenger said, and that's it. We can't even do that. As soon as somebody sits here and says, people are running for the exits like there's a fire. Again, the average person is not like the prophets. They don't have the strong will. They don't have the strong mind. It breaks them down. And we all have to understand the role that we play in that. People come and go. This community is a good example of that. People come and they give what they have. And they give it sincerely for the sake of Allah. And then they go and the people say, oh, we don't have classes, we don't have programs. What did we do when we did? Did we come? Did we make it a point? Did we make time? No, we didn't make time for this. But we can make time for everything else. People are outside partying while somebody's in here saying, Allah said, His Messenger said. وَلِيَذُ بِاللَّهِ. طيب ثم بعد ذلك, he said, فَإِذَا بِسَوَادٌ عَظِيمٌ. He said, then there appeared a massive assembly of people which I thought was my nation, my religious community, but I was told that those are Musa and his people. That is Musa and his people. But thereafter, there appeared an even larger assembly, and I was told that those were my followers. So here the Prophet ﷺ, he seems to be happy that he had a large following. So does that contradict what we said about not wanting to have large followers? No. We don't make having large followers the goal. But if we have a large following upon truth, then we're happy for that. Because it will increase what? Our ajr, our reward. It will increase our reward. That's why the Prophet was excited when he saw that what? He had this large following that rivaled or even what? It transcended the following of Moses sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But then he said that Allah said to the Prophet, among them are 70,000 who will enter paradise without reckoning or punishment. And this is the shahid. This is the reward for these people that we talked about, the reward that we all hope to achieve. That these people, these muhaqqiqeen at-Tawhid, that 70,000, that special group of Ummati Muhammad, they're going to get this reward that they'll meet Allah and they'll neither be reckoned or punished. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from them. So then it says, what time is the adhan?
32.
Okay, all right. So what we'll do is we'll stop and we'll wrap up next week. But I just want to mention one last mas'ala and then we'll stop. So he said that the Prophet stood up and he went to his room. And then they started, the companions, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim, they started discussing amongst themselves, who are these people? Who are these people? There must be some quality that they have that qualifies them to be from that special group. They knew it just wasn't arbitrary. It wasn't just that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just arbitrarily selected 70,000 people and made them from that group. There must be something they did. They started thinking, okay, what could they have done? So some of them, they said, لَعَلَّهُمْ مَنْ صَحِبَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم. Maybe they are the people, the companions of Allah's Messenger. Now this is problematic because the people who are having this discussion are what? They're all Ashab Rasulullah, they're all companions. So what do they mean when they say they're companions of the Messenger of Allah when they themselves were companions? Well, the word companions can have one of three possible meanings. One meaning is what we call al-mutlaq al-musahaba. It is just, it's purely linguistic, and it means any level of companionship. This is the linguistic meaning. Any level of companionship. Meaning that if anybody was in your circle for the briefest period of time, even if you and that person didn't see eye to eye, linguistically we would call that person your companion. And we see this usage in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah At-Takwir, the 82nd chapter, verse number, I want to say 22, he says, the 81st chapter, verse number 22, he says, وَمَا صَاحِبُكُمْ بِمَجْنُونَ. Your companion, and Allah is addressing the pagans. Your companion, referring to Muhammad, is not insane. So he calls Muhammad their companion even though they didn't see eye to eye. And they weren't in his circle. They weren't in his close proximity, but they were his companions in the sense that what? There was some level of what? Companionship. Right? Then There's a second type of suhbah, which is the one which is urfi. The companionship that basically the way that they use the word companion in what? In their normal discussions and what they traditionally would consider a person as being your companion. And that's the person who what? Yukthir as-suhbah. The person who's often in your presence. The person who you and him are like two peas in a pod. Every time I see you, I see him. Right? And that's the meaning that the companions meant when they said this right here. They were talking about people like Abu Bakr and Umar and those people, like these people who every time you see the Prophet, you see them. The closest of the Prophet's companions, which means Abu Bakr versus Abu Hurairah. Somebody who accepted Islam early on and was with the Prophet all the time, versus Abu Hurairah who accepted Islam very late and does not reach the same level as what? As Abu Bakr. You guys see that? That's the meaning that they intend here. The last meaning, the last one, is the one that we use Islamically, the Islamic terminology, when we say, for example, Ashab Rasulullah. And that would include Abu Bakr, and it would also include Abu Hurairah. And that legal meaning is, as the scholars have defined it, من لقي النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم مؤمنا به ومات على ذلك. The person who met the Prophet ﷺ and spent time with him, even with a brief amount of time. And at the time when he met the Prophet, he was a believer. And he died upon faith. That is the companion in what? In the legal sense, right? And that's supported by the Hadith collected by Muslim on Abu Hurairah, in which the Prophet, he entered the graveyard. And he was with some of his companions. And he said to him, وَدِدْتُ أَنِّي لَقِيتُ إِخْوَانِي. He said, I would love to meet my brothers. So the companions, they said, that were with him, they said, أَلَسْنَا إِخْوَانَكَ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. Are we not your brothers? He said, أَنْتُمْ أَصْحَابِي وَإِخْوَانِي أُنَاسٌ يَأْتُونَ بَعْدِي. He said, you are my companions. You have a special status. Because why? You met me. You walked with me. You were here during the time of revelation. And he said, my ikhwan, my brothers, are what? Are you. The people who they came, what? After the Prophet passed away. And that lets us know the difference between ikhwan Rasulullah, like you and me, inshaAllah ta'ala, and ashab Rasulullah. Ashab Rasulullah are the people who what? They met him, even for a brief period, and they believed. And the believers after the passing of the Prophet are his ikhwan. And we'll stop there, inshaAllah ta'ala. We have a little bit more to cover from the hadith and some of the masail, and then we'll pick it up from there next week, inshaAllah ta'ala, along with chapter number 4. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام. How are you doing? جزاك الله خير. شكرا لك.